right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Clark. I'm with AIS, and I am the Vice President of Strategic Accounts Group. And we're going to be talking about cybersecurity for SMBs and what to know, what you don't know will hurt you. And I'm also joined by Eric Kiemeyer, who is with our partner, the 20, and a security expert and a former business owner, and he'll tell you a little bit about his story. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So during today's presentation, if you have any questions at all, please use the chat feature. We will be answering those questions. And there'll be two opportunities during today's information we're sharing where you can actually answer a poll. And we can kind of get a good feel of what the group thinks of the information being asked. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Eric Kiemeyer.
Thanks, Dave. I like to share kind of up front that my job today is to scare everybody a little bit. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and this being one of the best things that you can actually do for yourself and for your business is security awareness training. So with that being said, I'll kind of dive in. Dave's absolutely right. What you don't know will hurt you. And one of the statistics that I like to share is from the Small Business Administration, 60% of small and medium businesses will close within 6 months of a cyber attack. Having run a small business, interacted with many small businesses, this should be a gut punch because a lot of people will say that, you know, they've heard about the items on the news, but it doesn't feel real to them. And one of the facts that I like to share is this is happening way more often than everybody realizes, other than the facts that are happening on the news that you see, which are the big national ones usually, or even things that are locally. Let me be the first to say that if you're a business owner and you had a breach in your business, you don't want to broadcast that to all your clients, vendors, and everyone else. So this is happening on a daily basis. It is an attack, and it is something that everybody needs to be aware of. It is real, and I will reiterate a few times a couple of things that I say, like my job is to scare you. If I don't do a good job of that by the end of this call, then I feel like I've failed you in the education piece. So something that people always hear about, their big targets versus, you know, the chicken plant or MGM, and I'm sure, Dave, you'll speak about that a little bit more, but you know, we used to say that our job was just to keep you running. Now we have to say that we have to keep you running and safe. A lot of people understand or have heard about ransomware, but you know, it's happening predominantly more and more, and people are not understanding the ramifications of just to themselves, their employees, their vendors, their partners, their clients. One of the examples that I kind of give is most people would have heard of the Target breach a few years back, but most people don't realize what really happened. It wasn't that Target themselves were the breach of the initial attack. It was an HVAC vendor that Target used, and hackers breached the small HVAC company, found an Excel spreadsheet that had the wireless network ID and passwords, and the attackers took that and drove to a Target parking lot and got onto the production network of Target, and that's how that breach happened. Another one that I like to share is a hospital that did make national news. They don't always tell the details, but what actually happened was the vending machine company rolled in a new pop machine. The delivery driver plugged into the network, which happened to be a production network that should have been turned off, but now every vending machine has a credit card processor on it, so it needs to connect to the internet somehow. The hackers breached the vending machine and were on the production network of the hospital, and that's how a HIPAA breach occurred. So these are some of the things that not everybody hears about, and I like to share this news because, yes, that is a little bit scary. I will also throw in tidbits of personal information. We have these smartphone devices, which are computers that we carry in our pockets every day now, and they are a good target as well. I share this because I have 2 young daughters. There was an attack going on where a text would come out to basically the victim saying, "Congratulations, you've won tickets to the latest concert happening here. Click this link to pick up your tickets at will call." Sadly enough, what this did was install a GPS tracker on the phone, and this is how human traffickers are actually attacking. So this is not just the corporate world. This is also something that, again, I hope to scare you a little bit to be cautious, because one of the biggest risks that you have is also your best defense. And the biggest risk you have are your people. People can get in a hurry and click on things. And I always say this before I go into this story. I'm human too. There was one day I was in my office and somebody walked in. I was expecting an invoice from a vendor. Here it came in my inbox. I clicked to open it up and a big red screen popped up. Fortunately for me, we had a lot of the tools in place. That big red screen basically said this was a known bad attacker and it blocked it. Now, unfortunately for me, I work with engineers and techs, and it pretty much notified them that I had all clicked on a bad link. But the question that I ask is, I'm in the industry, I'm trained for it, I speak on this, and if I'm in a hurry and can click on something, I feel like everybody could. So real breach stories that have happened and I've seen, I've got a couple from my experience over the years. Again, I like to say my mission is now to help you not have these events happen for yourself, your businesses, and your people. We had signed a small 10-person law firm, and 4 days before we were supposed to onboard them, I get a call. I'm taking my daughter to a practice on a Saturday morning, and I get this call saying that this client had had a ransomware breach. This was a small 10-person shop 4 days before we were going to install all of our tools, do all of our program, and the previous vendor had pretty much shut down and gone, "See you later, you're on your own." This small 10-person shop with ransomware was down for an entire week. During that week, we had to reinstall every workstation, reinstall every server. Worst part about this is that the previous IT who had basically shut down had also shut down their backups. So we had no data. They were fortunate at the time, and this was a few years back, that the ransomware demand that they had was approximately $12,000. For a small 10-person shop, fairly reasonable. The average payment for ransomware now is closer to $500,000 for any business, and this is insane in my world. But that small 10-person shop, while we installed everything, had to pay the ransom to get the data, then reinstall it, then clean it, do all of this. They actually had to put 2 of the workstations where the infection or the breach occurred away for their insurance company to do forensics. So they had to buy 2 new laptops as well. So that was approximately $4,000 on top of the $12,000 they paid to get their data back. And then all of the services from our company, because we hadn't started, was approximately $18,000. For a total of around $34,000 for a 10-person shop to have this one breach. That didn't include their loss of revenue. So the expense is real, and I love when people say that this doesn't happen to everybody, because this was a 10-person small business, and it all stemmed from somebody clicking on a link in an email that they shouldn't have. Another example of a company I had personal interaction with. Very similar circumstance. So many times people come to us kind of after the fact when somebody else has failed or onboarding, and that's a very risky time. So I always say you need to cover both areas of time frame to overlap security. Don't fire somebody on day 1 and expect day 2 to be going up. We want to have that up, because this other company that came to us was much larger. They were probably about 80, 90 employees, and same thing, right before we were supposed to onboard them, they had a breach happen. Now, because they were a larger organization, the first thing that has to happen is we had to contact their insurance company. Because we're support, we're not forensic security. So the insurance company required any machine that had been involved to be taken off network, shut down, and put into a storage room for their forensic team to go through and analyze every bit of information off of that. That happened to be about 20 machines. 20 machines of that network were just put in a closet where 20 people could no longer work. That company went out and immediately bought 20 laptops to let their people come back in and work, because the loss of revenue during them being down was going to be more than the $40,000 they spent on replacement machines. So this is another example. Fortunately with them, they had good backups. They reverted back. It wasn't an extreme, but we have to take second seat to insurance giving us the direction for forensic purposes. We will always lean on them, and they will always tell us there's a difference between a breach and an incident. The breach happens, we have to do reporting on data. They have to do a lot of different things for compliance needs. And also for our clients, we want to go to the insurance company first, because if anything goes outside of what they would require, they may not pay the claim. That's an important fact to remember. Now, also, I want to say this too. Most people don't realize that all these bad actors can come from anywhere. An example of this is we had some years back that if the attacker originated from North Korea or Russia, it was considered an act of war from the insurance company's point of view. Now, the other piece of this is you could actually be breaking the law if you paid the ransomware for this fact. The ransomware payment may go to a terrorist organization. So by paying that ransomware, you may inadvertently be supporting the terrorist organization. So we have to be able to lean on those who have forensic purposes and skills to go through that. So this is where we have to be very careful of saying it's not a matter of happening on a daily basis. We know this. So here's the question we ask of everybody. Do you believe your business is a target for an attack? Yes, no, not sure. I like to get this feedback because it's very important. And as we're getting that, sorry, go ahead, Dave.
That's okay. The poll should have popped up in your Teams. If you wouldn't mind answering that, that would be great.
So along this line, where I'm going to address the not sure, because one of the things that I've seen with prospects, for example, years ago, I walked into a doctor's office and they didn't understand why they needed a firewall. And I guess I didn't explain it right, or he was just dead set on not having that. But I said, I can't do business if you don't have that in place. I've had another company where I was talking and doing presentation like this for their team, and they said, we don't have anything sensitive data. And I stopped for a second, I looked around the room, and I said, well, you have employees, correct? Well, yes. I mean, they sold a widget, a gidget, something like that, nothing like trade secret. I said, well, you run payroll, correct? You have all of your employee information, their phone numbers, their home addresses, date of birth, social security numbers. Don't you owe it to your employees to protect their information? So my personal opinion on this poll is it's not a matter of if a cyber attack is going to happen, it's when. And when it happens, will you be prepared?
So you might be asking yourself, why do hackers love small and medium-sized businesses? Well, there's a couple different reasons why. The first is they have low budgets. What I mean by that is they don't necessarily invest a lot in IT infrastructure and cybersecurity protections. It doesn't mean you don't have computers. It doesn't mean you don't have servers, firewalls, things like that. But it's not really a planned out methodology. Most small, medium-sized businesses start very small and they organically grow over time. And what you find is that the growth doesn't necessarily align with your IT infrastructure, right? And there's not a technology roadmap. The other is outdated tools, right? It's all too common for small and medium-sized businesses to keep a computer that basically until it dies. And what happens is after a certain amount of time, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 years goes by, the firmware and security updates are no longer viable. Right? The manufacturers no longer provide it. It provides you, on average, there are 42 patches between firmware and security that happens on your computer on a monthly basis, on average. If you multiply that out times 2 years of not receiving any updates, imagine all the holes that hackers have found at that point to get into your network, because your weakest link is either going to be your people or your technology. The second is no training, right? It's just awareness. It's interesting, you know, I've been in this industry for 32 years, and it wasn't until probably the past couple of years clients have actually brought up the word cybersecurity or hack to me or to AIS. You know, AIS is a full technology company that deals in multiple different varieties of technology. And it used to be talking about specific widgets. And now it's business owners saying, I'm concerned that my employees don't know what to or not to do, or me as a business owner, what to and not to do. And so the real big push right now is to really make sure that there's awareness, there's training and understanding, and also testing, right? To make sure that your employees are not clicking on those nefarious links, for instance. Distracted owners, right? One of the things that I love about talking to small and medium-sized business owners is that they traditionally wear multiple hats, right? They are not focused on one particular thing. They're trying to grow their business, they're trying to handle their clients, they have their employees they're dealing with, they're making sure that they pay all their taxes and the lights are on and all those different types of things. There's just a lot of hats that most traditional owners of a small and medium-sized business have to really be able to focus on those things like cybersecurity and IT. And also a false belief that we're not a target. Eric was talking about that briefly. I do hear that sometimes, surprisingly from medical clinics, and they're probably one of the largest targets, right? Whenever you talk about not only financial information, personal information, but also HIPAA and medical records information. So these are some of the things that we look at. So what is the anatomy of a cyber attack? You may think, what are the different ways that they can get into our organization? Well, the first and the one we hear about the most, and we've been hearing forever, right? You think of McAfee virus protection on your email, for instance, is phishing. Right? They're sending in email, they're getting into your network, it's coming across, and they're hoping that you or one of your employees clicks on a link, or they open a web page, or they open a document. That at that point launches the attack, right? Next is going to be they have the access to it, right? So once they have the access to it, they can go and hide. The average hack, they get into your network, they actually sit there anywhere between 18 to 20 months before they do anything with that information. You might say, well, why is that? They want to learn. They want to learn the various ways that they can gain greater clarification of information, how they can get over hurdles that they've run into as they've been in your network. And they usually are dormant. And then they come out, and at that point, they steal everything. Think of it like a robber breaking into your house and hiding in the closet for over the weekend, and then waiting for you to leave. Now they know what your movements are, what you do every day, and now they're going to attack. Next is the encryption part of it, right? They actually encrypt your information to where you can't make any modifications. And then boom, next thing you know, you receive a ransom request for getting your data back, saying you need X amount of Bitcoin to be sent to this particular address. That's kind of how the traditional one works, for sure. So there are really a couple different things when you look at the vectors of threats, right? It's really simplified. We're looking at three different things. It's the people, right? The behavior, that's number one always. Next is going to be technology and weaknesses in technology, meaning do they have hardware that has the latest firmware and security updates? Do they have an adequate firewall? It's interesting, most business owners, if you are partnered with a data provider like Cox or Comcast or any of the big providers of data, they provide a modem. And in that modem is a entry-level type firewall, they call, that comes as part of the modem. Well, guess what? It's like having a screen door on your house, which is great on a nice fall or spring day to have your door open and have the wind blowing and flies don't get into your house. But quite honestly, if someone wanted to get into your house, they just kick the door in or bust through the screen. That is the example of a traditional firewall that comes with the ones that are provided by data providers. You need a true firewall. A firewall is like a safe door, right? They'd have to have the right combination. They'd have to drill through it for hours upon end. You want to make it very, very difficult for them to gain entrance into your building or into your house in the analogy that I used. And next is the processes. They're going to look at the process that you have in your business and managing that type of information. It's more prevalent when you look at organizations like legal and medical, and government agencies and education, because everything has different compliancy requirements around that. But they want to look at how are you managing the information and are you managing it appropriately? And then they're taking advantage of that information being managed inappropriately to gain access to that data. So ransomware reality. If we look at what ransomware used to cost versus what it costs today, over the past year, it's gone from about $312,000 in true lost costs for you and or the people directly affected by the data breach, all the way up to $500,000 and more. We actually had a client that got hacked. The way he got hacked is his brother is the CFO, and he took his personal laptop out and he logged into the server, and then he received an email and clicked on a link, and boom, they had access to the server. A couple of things wrong with that. Number one, he was using a personal device to access a company server. Number two is he clicked on a link that he probably should have never received, and had he been under the network policies, he never would have even received the email. But nonetheless, it took his business down for a week. We had an organization that had 30 employees. They are a small manufacturer, and they estimate that it cost them $450,000 in lost productivity and lost revenues. And then, of course, the cost to have a forensic analysis as well as us reset up their network. So it's real. It definitely is real. And it's sad when it happens. And every single time they're like, I thought I was protected, or I didn't think I would be a target. And you definitely are. I know Eric says he's trying to scare you. He says that in tongue in cheek. It is kind of scary. But the good news is there's very simple things that you can do to protect your business, which is great. Let's ask another question. What do you think hackers want the most? Money, data, customers' trust, all the above. Well, how about this? None of you are wrong. That's the good news. None of you are wrong. However, the correct answer is all of the above. And the reason being is that the reason they take data is either for leverage to get something they want, or money, traditionally money, and then also customer trust. What I mean by that is by them getting your data, now they have access to the people that you do business with and your employees to gain trust, to gain their information. And it's a trickle-down effect. The average hack actually goes 7 layers deep. 7 layers deep. Think of like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? Everything leads back to Kevin Bacon. In this case, it leads back to the hack. Once they gain all your information, it's not just getting your information. Now they have someone else's to go attack them. And that's where it really just balloons. Eric had brought up Caesar's Properties, or MGM, sorry, properties earlier, I believe it was about 1.5 years ago. And you would think, my goodness, large casino network, no one would be able to access the network at all. It would be protected, it'd be on lockdown. The answer is you're correct, it was. And it actually had nothing to do with any weaknesses in their peripherals or their actual security protocols or their policies. Someone went on LinkedIn, created a profile, acted like they were the COO of the organization, created a profile accordingly, found an employee in the IT department, reached out to him through LinkedIn to have his password reset and his username, and now gained access to the network. At no point did they try to attack the network at all. They actually did what's called social engineering and received the information another way from an information source, such as a IT person. And he thought he was talking to the COO. And there are plenty of things like multi-factor authentication, password policies that would have prevented that from ever happening. Because I think we would all agree most organizations would never reach out through LinkedIn or Facebook or any social media to have a password reset. They would probably have an internal policy that would either be a ticket request, you'd call in, and then it would be validated with, we get it all the time. Every time we log into our bank, we do multi-factor authentication. It's kind of the same way with a large organization with their passwords, but it's just crazy how things like that happen.
So one of the things that we have to do is kind of shift our mindset. So not only just to survive, but to thrive. And there's really 5 key areas that we can focus on here. And obviously, those will tell you kind of a framework for your business of how to actually make changes that can be help you sleep at night, really. So if we look at these individual shifts, the number one thing that I'm going to still harp on is strengthen your people. So again, I said that they are your biggest risk, but they're also your biggest defense. If you go to the FBI's website, the number one item that you can do to help prevent a breach in your business is security awareness training. So again, attending a seminar today or a webinar like this is one of the best things that you can do for your business. It would be an item, and again, I'll say this, also to think and slow down. Myself included, I get this. I could have looked at that email that I referenced earlier and seen that it wasn't from the domain that I expected it to come from. But there's a lot of these items to follow the policy and make sure that your people do the policy. Security awareness can be monthly, can be annually, more the better. One of the things that we share, and I will say this as a general for IT across all the industry, we would much rather you send us an email saying, hey, this one feels a little funny. Would you make sure it's okay before I do anything else? We would much rather spend 15 minutes looking at an email and saying it's good or bad versus all of the next week, all day, night, restoring the network. Because that is a simple truth of that. The second shift that you can do is secure your remote work. When COVID happened, everybody went home and we didn't necessarily put the measures in place that we should have. So instead of letting everybody just use a personal device, let's use an example. When's the last time a home router was updated? When's the last time you changed your Wi-Fi password on your home network? Most people will answer this when it was installed. Well, those have updates as well. So having a remote work policy, number one, is the policy that a company should have in place. They should hand that to the IT department and say, go enforce this policy. We have things like zero trust networks, remote capabilities, all of these keywords, but use the IT department to say, here's what we want to implement. Now go do that. I work remotely and would tell you I never would go into a Starbucks because if I was in a Starbucks, it's all open, clear communication on that. They've just given you Wi-Fi access. And if I went to my bank website, they can see my username and password. So I don't ever use those type of networks when I travel because I would only use my home or work for anything that I connect to. Otherwise, I'd use the wireless networks from my cellular provider. But there are tools now that can secure you even when you're remote. So that's an important piece, is make sure that your team has that right combination of tools to secure them wherever they need to work.
One of the things I was going to say, Eric, is that USA Today put out an article a couple of years ago, and they said 23% of all households, their standard password for their router in their house for their Wi-Fi is password 1234. 23% of Americans have password 1234 as their Wi-Fi password of their house.
So there's a joke, and I love to talk about this, and I'll kind of tell this story here for a minute. You know, we all have those passwords, and you know, IT would come and say, change your passwords every 90 days. We hate that, right? But we all had the password that we started with, and let's just call it password all lowercase. Then as time comes, we had to get a little bit more secure. So we had to add a capital letter. Now it's capital P password. Then we had to change it up and add a number in there. So now it's capital P password 1. Then we had to put a special character. Now it's capital P password 1 exclamation. Usually I'll ask for a raise of hands. How many people have that combination of their first password? I definitely still do. It goes back to my Hotmail account from many years ago. But keep in mind, a password is the key to accessing the data. So having a password that I reuse is fine for my Netflix or my Disney Plus. I don't even know my password for my banks and my credit cards. They're, you know, complex passwords, and I use a password safe for that. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. But on this step here, I see it all the time, that compliance is not necessarily means secure. Compliance is a good step for security. NIST 800-171 is a great standard for any business across the entire business industry. But there are specifics, HIPAA, SEC, FINRA, all of these other ones. It is a good practice to go through, do those audits, do those assessments, and continue to get your compliance status. But I will say compliance does not mean security. And if you become complacent after getting compliance, that's when breaches almost inevitably occur. Because now you go, I've got this compliance certificate, we're good, we're safe. It doesn't work that way. You have to continue to be proactive and preventative. These places, and I hate to say it, most people look at a breach and look at IT and say it's your fault, but I cannot be behind everybody's keyboard and make them not click on something. And something else that we used to do is say, viruses were always created before the antivirus. So these malicious actors have the threats before we have a defense. That's something that is very important to hear. So another key piece is investing in prevention. So the question I would ask, and you don't have to interject this, is would you rather budget for prevention or negotiate with the criminals to get your data back? I can tell you which one's harder. Now, contrary to belief too, is backups are not sufficient to control and augment for security. They are a safety net. Now, a lot of times I will also say there's 3 levels of backups that you should have. You need to make sure that you're not only backing up, but that you can test your recovery. So in those instances where, we had tape drives for years, and I'm going back decades now, telling on myself, I can tell you the people that used to go replace tapes and they were just told, go replace this tape every day and then swap them out. I can tell you how many times I walked into an organization, they're like, oh yeah, we got good backups. Here's the tapes. We've been doing this every day. Well, the backup job hadn't been running for over a year. So they had been wasting all their time, whereas it should have been fixed and knowing that it's good. A backup's only as good as what you can recover off of it. Another piece to this, and I will also share this, most people in budgeting from a business standpoint, I'll use the example of marketing. Most people know that marketing budget should be, say, 7% of total revenue. Well, CIO Magazine laid out a good guideline for IT budgeting, and that most average small and medium businesses should be spending, say, 6% of revenue on IT. I have talked to many business owners, and they could, on the first question, tell me how much they budget for marketing and have no clue for how much they budget for IT. IT is just viewed as a cost of business, and I get it, it is. But it is something that needs to have a priority in your business to stay afloat. Now, the other shift in this is balancing access and security. So accessibility is how easy, how fast does a machine run? If you have the ability to, you have to look at it this way. Every time we make something easier to access, security is subtracted. Every time we add security, accessibility is subtracted. So the more tools I put on your home machine, the slower it's going to get. The more tools I put on a work machine, the slower it's going to get. It has to process and run through. So I have this conversation a lot of times where everybody will see the latest, greatest tools and they'll just buy and put it out there. Something that we have to always kind of explain is it's not the amount of tools that you have, it's having the right tools configured properly for what you're needing it to do that will really win. So if you have people that need to have fast machines and you have compliance security needs, we have multiple layers that we have put on there, you may need more memory on a machine. But I always say be very wary of saying, I need the fastest, because every time it's fast, you're going to decrease some of your security. We want to balance those items out. Now, when these 5 shifts are put together, what you're really going to be doing is acknowledging your weak links, which is your people, your policies, and your processes. Those will be implemented. Again, I love it when somebody goes, hey, you're IT, give me an incident response plan. Well, that's more of a policy. We need to make sure it works for each company. We can help give guidelines, but that's like me writing your employee handbook. The second piece is support your employees wherever they are. Know how they're working and know how you need to protect that data. Again, that third piece, compliance does not always equal security, but they do go hand in hand. I highly recommend that you at least go for that NIST 800-171 compliance. That's a good foundation for every business to build upon. An ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. I've done these webinars for insurance companies, and they will also be the first ones to say, if you had $1 to spend on insurance or $1 to spend on the tools, we'd rather you spend it on the tools. If you spend it on the prevention, hopefully you never need the insurance. But a lot of times people will just view it as an expense that's too expensive, and insurance is there as that safety net. Invest in your support is the last item in this, and that's where I say that balance, because the support of your accessibility and security are critical. Those are there to help keep your business running, but know that support is not forensic security. They will work hand in hand for you. These 5 shifts alone are enough to upgrade your cybersecurity posture, and if you did these things, you'd be ahead of 88% of businesses that are not tying all of those 5 shifts together. More importantly, I think you would actually sleep better at night. And I will tell you from an IT standpoint, we would sleep better at night, which should make any of our clients sleep better at night. Once you make these changes and have them tied together, you should have better confidence in your systems and tools that you're producing for your people.
Thank you, Eric. So Eric shared a lot of information. So the executive cybersecurity checklist, these are the things that you might say, so what do I do now? It was great that you gave me this information, but what can I do now? And I want to be very clear, AIS is not trying to sell anything at all right here. We really are trying to educate our clients. If you don't choose to do some of these things with AIS, we recommend that you choose to do them with someone. That's what I'm going to tell you, with someone for the sake of your business. So some of the things you want to look at is the risk assessment. Depending upon the type of business you are, a general business, if you're a legal business, if you're medical, obviously you'd have a HIPAA risk assessment audit that you do annually anyway, and you already have that part of your business practices. If you're a business that deals with financials, you may want to have the CMMC certification and risk assessment, and then a planning and a partnership. You may want to do pen testing, which is penetration testing, right? How vulnerable is my network today is very important. 24/7 monitoring, even if you don't do it with AIS, we'd recommend that you have a firm that manages your devices and servers 24/7 and identifies anomalies. It identifies when someone does get access to your network. It quarantines bad information coming into your organization. It prevents those people from growing and spreading throughout your organization. Also, tested recovery, as Eric had mentioned a few minutes ago. Making sure that you have a recovery plan is one thing, but then testing it, right? Let's make sure that it's working. Let's make sure that the backup's happening. Let's make sure that you have a secure way to have your business up and operational within 15 minutes to an hour. Also, multi-factor authentication. If you don't have this today, which as on a personal level, we have it for everything, I would highly recommend that you do that. Having multi-factor authentication takes it from the ability for someone to have access to your network, let's say 15 minutes to an hour with the standard password. If you have multi-factor authentication, it could take them up to 30 years to gain access. It's just a different combination that adds layers and layers and layers that prevents them from being able to access your network. So find out where you stand, right? You want to have a risk meter, right? You want to take a look at, I am a small, medium-sized business, I'm cyber ready, and then all the way up to your data protection. You want to make sure that you understand where your business stands today. Information is key. And then once you have that information, you can establish a rollout plan of, here are the immediate things that we need to take care of today that are on fire. Here are things that we notice that could spark and create a fire later, could probably be addressed over time. And then long-term issues. And then making sure that your operational maturity level matches where your IT is, right? A lot of times businesses grow at a faster rate than your infrastructure can handle. And whenever it starts to spread that infrastructure thin, it creates those cybersecurity threats to your business. Let's make sure that your IT infrastructure is in alignment with what your business does and how you manage information. So if you would like, you can get a 15-point cyber risk assessment from AIS. We do not charge you for it. If you see the QR code there and you want to go to the web page and possibly sign up to have us do one for you, we definitely can. If not, we're going to be answering questions here in a few minutes, but also please feel free to reach out to any of your sales reps that might have invited you, or the executives at AIS, or of course Eric, on any questions that you have in regards to cybersecurity and how it may specifically impact your organization. But again, this is a good starting point. If you don't do it with AIS, make sure that you partner with some type of company that can run some type of cybersecurity risk assessment on your business. Okay. So we're going to go to the questions. Cliff, I believe you have some, sir. If you'd like to roll them out, Eric and I can figure out who's going to answer.
Absolutely. The first one that we have here is, what is one or two things that small businesses can do today to stay safe from cyber attacks?
Okay. If I had to pick two small things, right, I'm going to pick the things that would be the least expensive and the most impactful. Number one, have a password policy. Let's start with that. Have a password policy. Most businesses don't. Let's start with, what are you going to make your employees have in regards to some type of combination of a password policy that makes sense? Now, you may not want to have them change it every 90 days, but at least once a year. And let's make it difficult, like a phrase or something like that. That would be number one. Inexpensive, may not cost anything. You can roll out a password management policy in your business at no cost. The second, I would say, would be making sure you have good firewalls and you have a validated backup policy. That would go hand in hand, right? Do you have a good front door on your house? Does it have a good lock on it? And if someone did get in, could we recover and replace all of our furniture? That's kind of the analogy that I would look at.
One of the things too, I will agree with the password policies and changes. That NIST, which actually stands for National Institute of Standards and Technologies, recently changed the point of view of, you don't necessarily have to change your password every 90 days if you have MFA on there. So MFA is that second barrier to protecting that password. So I highly recommend MFA on anything that you could possibly put it on. It's a second validation way. And I would also put on there that the cheaper of tools would be a password manager.
Okay, keeping in that vein, Eric, what are some password managers that you would recommend?
The one that I use in work is Keeper. I love it because it will, I don't have to come up with any of these multi-complex 16-character passwords. It'll generate it for me. I can save it. I don't know, again, like my bank account passwords and things like that. But in a work environment, it will also allow, for example, if somebody left the organization and you shared a password with the accounting team, you've got control of that. You know where it is. They didn't necessarily have it. So it does allow you to kind of have shared resources as a password manager for an organization. It's not like somebody's individual one. I personally use at least two. I have one for work, one for personal, but I definitely recommend Keeper in a work environment.
What should small businesses be most concerned about when it comes to cybersecurity?
I would say their employees, probably their employees. And what I mean by that is, one thing you cannot change or correct or be on top of all day long is human behavior. And in no circumstances do I think employees have nefarious or bad intentions at all. But they inadvertently cause a problem that could create a huge problem for your business. And so one of the ways you can do it is educating your employees and making them aware and walking through examples of what some of these things look like. The second would be is, as Eric had mentioned before, is that security awareness training. When we talk about security awareness training, we're not talking about hours and hours of in-classroom training or webinars. These are little snippets of 30 seconds to 2-minute tutorials that are just sent out once a month, once every couple of weeks, and then maybe once a quarter or maybe twice a year. Do some testing, right? Let's make sure that the employees are actually retaining that knowledge and they're growing with their behavior and becoming more aware. If you did that, Oh my goodness, your life would be so much easier and you definitely sleep better at night.
So I want to add on that. I'll add a question for everybody. I've gotten it before. How would I hack your network if I was malicious? So what a lot of people think of is what they see in the movies or they hear on the news. You know, there's some hacker in a basement in Europe or wherever going through the firewalls, going past the antivirus, going past all the password policies and so forth. And I said, wait a minute, I'm going to take 10 thumb drives and I'm going to throw them in your parking lot. And they're like, what? To mimic what Dave just said, is human nature is, oh my, I wonder if somebody's baby photos, tax returns, or whatever are on that thumb drive. And human nature, to the kindness of their heart, they're going to pick it up and want to go into your network and plug it into a computer to find out maybe there's a name on there and they can get it back to the owner. Well, if they did that, they opened up the back door for me. I didn't have to hack a network. I didn't have to go through firewalls and policies and so forth. How does IT stop your people from plugging in that thumb drive I put in a parking lot? You're going to tackle them at the front door?
Good question. That's
So
scary.
the people,
Now you got me creeped out. If I find a thumb drive, I'm no longer plugging it in there. I've never done that. But
no, and the other piece to that though too is it's okay to have human nature, but when you see something like that, this is where policies come, because we hate it when somebody goes, okay, we're going to lock out every USB to where that can never happen. Well, you find something, be smart and go to IT and say, we found this thumb drive in the parking lot. Can you check it, make sure it's hazardous? They will take it to a machine that's called a sandbox. It's not connected to the network. They'll put it in there, run scans, make sure it's not malicious. And then maybe if there is baby pictures or tax returns, you can get it back to the correct owner. But if you're like me and I wanted to be lazy, and most people who are hacking are lazy, don't open the back door for them.
And finally, looking at our 15-point cyber assessment, risk assessment, what's the most revealing insight small businesses can usually get from that?
what's interesting, it's usually an eye opener because it looks at a couple different things. Number one, it looks at your health of your network, and it looks at the health of your security within your network. And those two things kind of go hand in hand, but they also kind of diverge. What I mean by that is you want to understand where your network is today and what are some of the vulnerabilities, right? It's not just understanding this widget, it's this many years old or anything like that. It's this widget's in place. The last time I had a security update was 4 years ago. That's a problem. Another thing is, hey, we found 5 users where their information, username and password is being bought and sold on the dark web. Not great, right? But you'd like to be aware of that and easily fix it, right? Have them change their password. Next is a password policy, right? It tells you the last time they changed the password. My favorite is when you see one that says like 22 years ago is the last time they had a password change. And then the security aspect, it's going to let you know the health. It's going to let you know, here's where you are today. Here are the things you need to address immediately. Here's some things you need to start addressing 6 months to a year down the road, and then 3 to 5 years down the road. And I think that's good, right? Because knowledge is king. And understanding where you start today, it's kind of like when you go in for a test or an MRI, a doctor doesn't look at you and go, here's your problem. They usually run a bunch of tests. Let's start at, we'll find out how you are, what the issue is, what the severity of it is, and then they create a treatment plan for you. It's kind of the same thing here with the cybersecurity risk assessment.
What advice do you have for IT teams trying to secure more funding from or for stronger cybersecurity, especially when it's difficult to get buy-in from upper management?
That's a question for Eric, for sure.
Make it a business discussion. So it's kind of like I've never heard an IT person come and say, I've got enough money. There's always something more, right? It's kind of like in an operations standpoint, I say this, I've never had an operations person come to me and say, I don't need more people. We always could need more people, always need more budget. But I would say make it a business discussion in this is turn it into what happens when we're down? What is the downtime that we can live with? And if you think that we can be down for 4 hours or 8 hours, then I can implement the IT and technology to mimic that. So with management, this is where I say is don't talk IT, talk business. because the business side of it is the relevant piece. How much loss of revenue do we have? Can we take and really come in and say, okay, if my budget is 6%, 7% of total revenues, we can work with that and also share with them the gaps, because that 15-point assessment that Dave was talking about, it kind of lines out in a business standpoint, here are the recommendations that we need to have. And clearly for business decision makers, what's missing? Well, in everything IT does have a cost. So, I used to hate and love to have this conversation. Somebody come in and say to me, well, you're too expensive. Can you make it cheaper? Okay, well, I can. What would you like to remove? It's not about making a product cheaper, which a lot of people think that it's just cheaper and delivering the same product. It does cost more to do this. So if I take that gap or that assessment and say, we don't have a password policy or password safe. Here's how much one costs for next year's budget to consider. And this is a likely gap that we have. Our firewall is our best protection for what comes in and out of the network, and it's 3 years old or 4 years old. We should replace it every 3 years. Here's how much that costs. Make it a business and budget discussion.
The other thing I would add to that, Eric, is that we actually help some of our clients that have existing IT groups make that business case. And one of the things that's usually missing is, we need X, Y, Z for this. They talk about what the final outcome would be and the reason why they want to do it. But they don't really talk about the reason if they didn't do it, right? What is the cost to the business if they don't make a decision? And I think if you're talking to executive management group, you want to talk about, here's what I'm recommending and here's why, and here's the benefits to our organization. If we don't, here's the risk to our organization, financially and operationally. How will it impact our business? And then let them weigh out the decision, right? Is the pros outweighing the cons? I think most business owners and executives are going to look at the positives and negatives of everything to make a good business decision. So it's not just about understanding what's going on in your network, the decision you're making and the recommendation and why it'll impact your business, but what is the cost to not do anything is probably just as important.
I also want to add on that too. I think not having that conversation consistent enough. So we do quarterly reviews and say, here's where the gaps are. Talking about budget once a year and what's missing is a once a year conversation. I would say it needs to be talked about at least quarterly, of saying, hey, we talked about it. This is the stance we're at right now. Here's what's missing, because it's top of mind and it'll continue the conversation moving forward.
And one final thing to add on to that, I know we said final thing, but if you are an IT professional or IT group selling to your executives on a major change that you want to make or a change that you want to make, sometimes, as you know, this is our end goal that we want to get to, but we might have to make small incremental changes to get to it. So it may not be, hey, well, I'm here and I want to go here. It may be, hey, over the next year, here's where I want to get to, and here are the changes I'd like to see every quarter. And then it makes that impact to the budget a little less impactful. And I think that they would look at it and say, okay, they've thought this out, and they have a cohesive plan put in place.
How do you guys see ransomware tactics and cyber attack tactics evolving in the future?
Oh my goodness, I would have to say AI. AI. And not my dad. My dad's an older gentleman, and he said, Dave, what's I? And I'm like, what are you saying, Dad? And he was trying to say AI, and he said, I. And I go, Dad, AI is basically involved in everything now, right? Everything that you do on a computer, even using your Amazon Fire Stick, it's using AI to determine what you'd like to watch. It's determining where you want to go and how you find things. Well, hacking is moving into utilizing AI tools. Think of it like this. They used to write scripts or software that would go through all the different variations of password combinations they could think of, and eventually over time it would solve it. Now imagine AI that is 1,000 times faster than any script that's ever been written, that can write these type of tools for hackers with no hacking experience whatsoever, and then launched into any type of organization, vertical market organization. So yeah, AI is probably going to be the thing we see where it is responsible for large scale hacks that the traditional human hack would not have been able to accomplish on their own, for sure.
And I'll just go ahead and say it's already here.
Of course. Yep. So I want to start by saying thank you to each and every one of you for joining us today. I know your time is very, very valuable, and we hope that you found the information that Eric and I shared and AIS shared to be beneficial to your organization. Again, if you need any help with any of these types of changes in your organization, or help understanding how cybersecurity can be less impactful or more impactful on your business, depending upon your state of mind, please reach out to AIS, myself, or Eric, or anybody on the team. We'd be more than happy to help you. And as always, for our clients, we appreciate you as our clients. And for our potential clients down the road, we hope that you consider us for business in the future. Without further ado, I want to wish you a wonderful day, and thank you for spending your time with us. Take care.